Clarence Darnell figured it was just another quiet Friday night with his usual steak until the new waitress leaned in and whispered 7 words that turned dinner into something else entirely. Those words shifted the air, and what was supposed to be a simple meal became a moment he knew he'd remember. Every Friday, like clockwork, Clarence pulled into the same narrow parking spot at Gene's Roadhouse Grill, just off East Doreen Avenue in Savannah. His old Ford Ranger gave its familiar 2 coughs before going silent. He stepped out, jeans neatly pressed that morning, burgundy flannel buttoned to the top, and his Army-issued cap tipped slightly forward like a man who never truly let his guard down, not even for dinner. That cap wasn't just habit. It was history. He didn't need to glance at a menu. Never had. Medium rare ribeye, house fries, collard greens, and a tall glass of iced tea. 2 sugars. No lemon. Always. That was Clarence's ritual. And in this town, rituals carried weight. Inside, the air was heavy with mesquite smoke and beef fat. The floorboards groaned under work boots. Locals filled the booths, some contractors, retired teachers, the occasional cop on break. People didn't fuss over Clarence. They gave him the space you reserve for men who've seen more than they'll ever say. He always took the booth by the window. From there, he had a clear line to both the parking lot and the entrance. Habit. Reflex. Years of learning to watch your own back when no one else would. But tonight had a different feel. Not loud, not obvious. Just different. The usual waitress Bernice, with her jangling bracelets and booming laugh, wasn't there. Instead, a stranger approached. Mid to late 20s, pale skin, ponytail pulled so tight it looked like she was holding herself together with it. The name tag read, E. Carver. She gripped her notepad like it might bite. "Hi there, I'll be taking care of you tonight," she said, forcing a polite smile. "You ready to order?" Clarence looked up slowly. "Medium rare ribeye, fries and greens. Tea." She blinked. "Yes, sir." Pen moving fast. He didn't expect anything more. She was already turning away when he added, "No lemon." She paused, nodded, jotted it down, and walked toward the kitchen. That should have been the end of it. But 5 minutes later, she was back empty-handed. No drinks, nothing in hand. Just standing beside his booth, eyes flicking toward the kitchen. "Mr. Sorry, what's your name?" "Clarence." She leaned in a little. "Clarence, how long do you think you'll be staying tonight?" His eyes narrowed a fraction. "Long enough to finish my meal." She hesitated. Lips parting, closing again, then she dropped her voice to a near whisper. "They don't want you here tonight." The words landed like the sound of silverware hitting tile. Clarence stilled no big show, just a subtle shift like a man. Switching from relaxed to ready. He looked at her steadily. "Come again?" She glanced around. The place still buzzed laughter from a booth, clinking cutlery, classic rock low from the speakers. She leaned closer. "They don't want you here tonight. I thought you should know." His fingers curled against the table's edge. His voice stayed even. "Who's they?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes cut toward a shadowed corner beyond the bar. A large booth. 4 men. 1 bald with tattooed arms. 1 with a goatee and a smirk that didn't move. 2 others built like they belonged on hunting gear ads. All of them were already watching him. Clarence turned back to her. "You sure that warning's for me?" She didn't smile. "I don't joke with tables." He sat back, arms folding. His tone dropped lower. "You knew." "What? A week and a half," she murmured. Clarence exhaled slowly through his nose. "And you're already delivering messages for other people?" "Not messages," she said. "I just overheard something. Thought you'd want to know." He didn't thank her, not yet. He didn't say anything at all. Just studied her face, like he was trying to read the years she hadn't lived yet. Something in her eyes told him this wasn't idle gossip. It was personal. He didn't blink for several beats, just held her gaze, weighing whether she was worth listening to or simply caught in something bigger than she realized. She didn't flinch under that look. That alone told him plenty. His tea finally arrived. She set it down like it might shatter. Even the ice clinked like it was nervous. Clarence took a slow sip, never breaking eye contact. "You want to sit?" he asked calmly. Emily glanced toward the kitchen, hesitated, then slid into the seat across from him like someone racing a clock. "I'm not supposed to be off the floor," she murmured. "Then talk fast," Clarence said, keeping his tone just above a whisper. "What exactly did you hear?" She twisted her notepad's corner, eyes darting sideways. "They've been coming in the last few weeks. Same group. Always that booth. Last Friday, they left a note said certain types of customers make the place feel tense." Clarence's brow lifted. "Certain types?" She gave the faintest nod. "That's what it said. No names, just that." He leaned in slightly. "And you think they meant me?" Emily swallowed. "They described a man who always wears a flannel shirt and a veteran's cap. The one who sits by the window." That description was enough to let silence spread between them. The restaurant kept moving, chefs shouting orders, a toddler giggling at the back, a fork clattering to the floor somewhere but at their booth. Everything stilled. Clarence finally spoke. "And Jean's fine with that?" She looked down. "I don't know what Jiang thinks. I've only met him once. His son, Travis, runs things now. Doesn't say much. But, you know, the guy's in." "That booth?" "One of them," she said. "We went to high school together." He wasn't exactly subtle back then either. Clarence's eyes narrowed. "Name?" She hesitated then. "Logan Mercer. Senior when I was a freshman. Always in trouble fights, vandalism, but it all just disappeared off his record. Family had money," Clarence said quietly, more to himself than her. He leaned back. "And now he's the kind of man who leaves notes for management?" Emily nodded once. "Runs a contractor business. Half his crew eats here every week. Tips heavy. Brings people in." Clarence watched her, letting her words settle. "And you're telling me because—" She met his eyes head on. "Because the last time someone like him started deciding who belonged and who didn't, folks stayed quiet until it got loud. I don't want to wait for loud." Clarence let her words hang between them. He respected the courage. Saying this out loud wasn't small. "You afraid of him?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Her hands folded in her lap, knuckles tight. "I'm afraid of where that talk leads. And I'm afraid no one else here will say a thing." Clarence glanced down at her hands. They were shaking. He looked back toward the corner booth. All 4 men were still watching. "Logan used to mess with you back then?" She nodded. "Locked me in storage closets, started rumors. He moved away for a while, but now he's back and acts like he owns this town." Clarence's gaze sharpened. Like a puzzle piece had just clicked into place. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice low but firm. "What is it you want me to do?" Emily blinked. "I don't know. You telling me this. You either want me to leave or you want me to stand up. And I don't leave just because someone says so." She breathed out long, heavy. "I wanted you to be ready, not blindsided." Clarence took another sip of tea, setting the glass down with a quiet tap. "I'm ready now," he said. But he knew between him and the truth were 5 tables and 4 sets of eyes tracking his every move. His senses sharpened. Too many desert patrols had taught him to notice when a room's current shifted, when something under the surface stopped flowing right. And now he felt it. Not just from the corner booth. From the bar to his left, where the bartender had stopped polishing glasses, eyes darting between him and Emily. Even the busboy sweeping at the back had slowed. Emily stood, like she was about to say more, but a voice from the kitchen called her name. Not a request. A sharp command, like a warning shot. She gave Clarence one tight look, before heading quickly to the kitchen doors. Vanishing through them, Clarence stayed where he was, back straight, gaze steady. No phone in his hand, no keys. Just stillness, like the only man in the room not pretending. 10 seconds later, the chair across from him scraped back. Someone slid into it. He didn't need to look to know who it was. "Still like that corner table, I see," a voice said. Low, smug, southern. Clarence lifted his head. Across from him sat a man in a gray shirt with sleeves rolled up, a buzz cut too tight for the decade, and a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Logan Mercer," Clarence said flatly. Logan leaned back, casual, as if they were old friends meeting for drinks. "Heard you come here every Friday. Figured I'd introduce myself since we're both regulars." Clarence didn't return the smile. "Can't say I was waiting for that," Logan chuckled. "Well, you know how it is, some folks just don't mix well. When you start seeing patterns, it's polite to speak up." Clarence tilted his head. "Speak up to who?" "To the folks who run this place. People who care about their regulars." Logan leaned in a little. "This place has a certain atmosphere. You change the ingredients too much. The flavor changes, know what I mean?" Clarence stared at him. "I know exactly what you mean." Logan kept smiling, but now his fingers tapped the table. "You don't strike me as dumb, Clarence. You're ex-military. You know about systems, order, chain of command." Clarence's reply was steady. "I also know when orders are garbage and how to push back." He leaned slightly forward. "So if you've got something to say it plain." Logan's smile tightened. "This isn't about you, personally. But some places just work better when people stay in their lane. Yours isn't this one." The air between them heated like a lit fuse no one wanted to touch. Clarence leaned forward. "Let me tell you something. I've earned the right to sit where I want, eat what I want, and exist without asking your permission." Logan's smirk returned. "Sure, but this isn't about the law, it's about comfort. Mine, there's even hers." Clarence's brow rose. "Hers?" Logan nodded toward the kitchen. "Emily, you think she warned you out of kindness? She's scared. And when people like you make noise, folks like her take the heat." Clarence didn't move. "People like me?" he repeated, voice flat. Logan shrugged, as if the meaning were self-evident. "You stand out, Clarence. Not in a way that makes this place easy. Folks want familiar. They want simple. You," he gestured vaguely, "bring questions. Maybe that's because I've lived long enough to know simple's a lie," Clarence said, eyes locked on him. Logan leaned back. "Doesn't matter if it's a lie. What matters is if people feel it's true." "Feelings change," Clarence replied. Logan's smirk thinned. "Not in places like this." A tense beat passed. The voices from the bar dipped, like the room itself was leaning in. Clarence's hand rested on the table, still, steady, but close enough to his pocket to send a message. "You done?" he asked. Logan studied him for a moment, then smiled. Again, this time without the warmth. For now. He pushed himself from the seat and walked back toward the corner booth, where the other 3 men were waiting. Clarence watched him go, jaw set, then finally exhaled through his nose. He picked up his glass, took a slow sip, and glanced toward the kitchen doors. Emily hadn't come back out. 10 minutes later, his ribeye arrived, still sizzling, juices pooling at the edge of the plate. Bernice might have joked about the cut, or teased him about the flannel, but the young runner who delivered it didn't say a word. Just set the plate down, slid the fries beside it, and left. Clarence cut into the steak, chewing slow, never taking his eyes fully off the room. The corner booth laughed at something too loud, too deliberate. He'd been in enough tense rooms to know when laughter wasn't about joy. It was about making sure you knew they were still there. A shadow moved in his periphery. Emily had slipped out from the kitchen, not toward his table, but toward the front door. She paused just long enough to glance back, meeting his gaze for half a heartbeat. Before stepping outside, Clarence's knife hovered mid-cut. Something was off. He set the utensils down, tossed a few bills on the table, and followed not in a rush, just a slow, measured walk that didn't draw eyes until he was already outside. The night air was cool, the parking lot half lit by flickering lamps. Emily stood near the far end, phone in hand, head low. "You shouldn't have followed me," she said without looking up. "And you shouldn't be out here alone," Clarence replied. She finally lifted her gaze. "They're not going to let this go. Once you're on Logan's list, you stay there." "That's supposed to scare me?" Clarence asked. "No," she said quietly, "but I've seen what happens to people on it. And I don't think you care what happens to you, but you should care about what happens to the people around you." Her voice cracked on the last word. Clarence studied her for a moment, then took a step closer. "Emily, why do you really care what happens to me?" She hesitated too long. "Because I owe someone. Someone who'd have told me to speak up, even if it made things worse." "Who?" he asked. "My brother," she said. "Army. He didn't make it home." The space between them went still. Clarence's expression shifted, barely, but enough to tell her he understood more than she'd guessed. "What was his name?" "Caleb," she said softly. "Caleb Carver." Clarence nodded once, like he'd just locked away the information somewhere permanent. "All right," he said finally. "Let's make sure you're not next on that list." Emily's brows pulled together. "What are you planning?" "Nothing stupid," he said, though his tone didn't match the words. "But I've seen men like Logan before. If you ignore them, they think they've won. If you push back, they push harder," she finished. "Yeah," he said. "So you make sure when they push, they don't get what they expect." Emily glanced toward the door. "I have to get back before they notice I'm gone." "Go," Clarence said. "I'll settle my check and head out." She gave him a long look, half gratitude, half warning, before walking back inside. Clarence stayed a moment longer in the lot, scanning the shadows, before finally following her in. Inside, the corner booth was empty. Plates gone, glasses half drained. Only the smell of beer and cheap cologne lingered. He paid at the counter, leaving more cash than the meal was worth. No tip line, no note, just quiet departure. The door swung shut behind him, and the night seemed a little darker than before. He reached his truck, unlocked it, and froze. A folded piece of paper was tucked under the wiper blade. He pulled it free, unfolded it, and read 3 words written in thick black marker. "We see you." Clarence's jaw flexed. He folded the note in half, then in half again, before slipping it into his pocket. He didn't look around, just got in, started the engine, and drove off into the quiet streets of Savannah. But his mind wasn't quiet. Men like Logan didn't just send messages for fun. There was always a next step, and Clarence had just decided, whatever it was, he'd be ready. He tapped the steering wheel twice, a small, unconscious rhythm, and turned down a road that didn't lead home. If Logan Mercer wanted to play a game, Clarence Darnell would make sure it was one he couldn't win. The truck's headlights cut through the dim back streets, passing shuttered storefronts and cracked sidewalks. Clarence knew exactly where he was headed. Not home, not anywhere safe, but somewhere that might give him answers. 15 minutes later, he pulled into a gravel lot behind a rundown bar called the Copper Still. The place had a reputation, one of those spots where trouble didn't come to find you. It was already there, waiting. Clarence killed the engine, stepped out, and walked in through the back door. Inside, the air was thick with cigarette smoke and the sour tang of spilled whiskey. A jukebox in the corner wheezed out a country song from 2 decades ago. A few heads turned when he entered, then quickly turned back, except for one. Behind the bar stood a stocky man in his late 40s, with a shaved head and a scar that disappeared into his collar. "Well, I'll be," the man said, his voice low and gravelly. "Donnell, didn't think you were still in town." "Earl?" Clarence said simply, sliding onto a stool. Earl poured 2 whiskeys without asking. "Word is you've been making new friends over at Jean's," he said, pushing 1 glass forward. "Not the kind worth keeping," Clarence replied. Earl chuckled darkly. "Logan Mercer? And his crew?" Earl shook his head. "Boys like that. They're not playing at being tough. They've got backing, money, the kind of friends who can make a body disappear without much paperwork." "What kind of backing?" Clarence asked. Earl leaned closer, voice dropping. "Construction contracts, security jobs. Hell, I've heard his name tied to some shady warehouse deals down by the docks." "Illegal?" Earl shrugged. "Let's just say they don't put everything in writing." Clarence took a sip of his drink. "And Emily?" Earl's brow furrowed. "Emily Carver? She's tough, but she's in over her head. Her brother used to come in here, good man. Kept to himself. When he died, she lost her anchor. She's got Logan's attention now," Clarence said. Earl swore under his breath. "That's not good. He doesn't just want her scared. He wants her dependent. And once he's got that..." Earl let the sentence die there. Clarence's jaw tightened. "You know where they meet when they're not at Jean's?" Earl gave him a long look. "Why?" "Because I'm not waiting for them to make the next move." Earl sighed, then reached under the bar, pulling out a scrap of paper. He slid it across. An address scrawled in block letters. "Warehouse on Harrow Street, late nights. Don't go alone." Clarence pocketed the paper and finished his drink. "Appreciate it," he said, standing. Earl shook his head. "You're either brave or stupid, Darnell. I'm not sure which." "Sometimes it's the same thing," Clarence replied, heading for the door. The drive to Harrow Street was quiet, the city thinning out into industrial lots and forgotten rail lines. Streetlights were scarce here. Shadows ruled the edges. Clarence parked 2 blocks away, tucking the truck behind an abandoned service station. He moved the rest of the way on foot. The warehouse loomed ahead, corrugated steel, rust streaks, 1 flickering light above a side door. Voices carried from inside low, urgent. Clarence crouched near a stack of pallets, edging close enough to catch fragments of conversation. "Shipment's late. Boss ain't happy. Tell him we'll move it tomorrow night. Too much heat right now. And what about the old man at Jean's? Logan says he'll handle him, one way or another." Clarence's grip tightened on the edge of the pallet. So it wasn't just intimidation, they were planning something. He pulled back into the shadows as the side door opened. Logan stepped out, talking to one of his men. "Make sure she knows we're watching. Every move she makes." Emily. Clarence stayed still, tracking their path as they walked toward a black SUV parked nearby. Once the vehicle pulled away, he slipped around to the side door, testing the handle. Locked. He moved along the wall until he found a window cracked open near the back. Slipping inside, he landed in a dim storage area stacked with crates. The air smelled of motor oil and damp wood. He crept forward, scanning the labels on the crates, none of them marked in English. A noise behind him made him freeze. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, getting closer. Clarence eased his hand toward the small folding knife in his pocket. A shadow stretched across the floor in front of him. "You're a long way from Jean's, Donnell," a voice said behind him. He turned slowly. One of Logan's men, a broad-shouldered brute with a shaved head, blocked the way out. "Guess I am," Clarence said evenly. The man smiled without humor. "Logan thought you might come snooping. Said to give you a message." "Yeah? What's that?" "Stop, or we make you stop." Clarence didn't answer. He just shifted his stance. The man lunged. Clarence sidestepped, driving his shoulder into the man's ribs and twisting his arm until something popped. The man roared, swinging wide, but Clarence ducked under it, sweeping his legs out from under him. The brute hit the floor hard, gasping. Clarence knelt, pressing the knife tip just enough against his throat to make a point. "Tell Logan," Clarence said, voice low. "I'm not going anywhere. And neither is she." He stood, stepping back. "Now get out of my way." The man scrambled toward the door, clutching his arm. Clarence slipped back out the window, disappearing into the night before reinforcements could arrive. Back in his truck, he sat for a moment, watching the warehouse from a distance. Lights flickered inside. Shadows moved fast. This was bigger than a grudge over a seat at a restaurant. And now, Clarence knew he was in it whether he liked it or not. He started the engine and drove off, already planning his next move. But as he passed a glowing neon sign for jeans in the distance, one thought cut through the noise. Emily was still in the middle of this, and she had no idea how deep it went. Clarence tapped the steering wheel twice, the habit settling in again, and took the long way home. Tomorrow, he'd go back to jeans. And this time, he wouldn't be coming just for steak. This time, he'd be coming for answers. The next day, Jean's Roadhouse Grill buzzed with the usual Friday lunch crowd: contractors, retirees, a couple of families with restless kids. Clarence stepped through the door, scanning the room like he always did. Emily was there, moving between tables, her ponytail swinging, a practiced smile on her face. Their eyes met for a split second before she looked away. He took his usual booth by the window. No menus, no wasted motions, just sitting, waiting. This time, it wasn't about the steak. Emily came over, pen poised. "Medium rare ribeye fries." "Greens, sweet tea, no lemon?" she asked. "You remember," he said. "Hard to forget someone who stirs up half the room." She replied quietly. "They still watching you?" She nodded once, almost imperceptibly. More than before. Clarence leaned forward. "Then here's the plan." "No," she cut in, her voice low. "No plans. I've seen what happens when people go up against Logan. They don't win." "Maybe they don't because they don't know how," Clarence said evenly. Emily's lips pressed into a thin line. "Or maybe it's because he doesn't fight fair." Before Clarence could respond, the front door opened. Logan Mercer walked in with two of his men. The air shifted instantly, like someone had dimmed the room. They didn't sit at the corner booth this time. Logan walked straight over. "Morning, Clarence," he said, all teeth. "Logan," Clarence replied flatly. Logan leaned an elbow on the table. "Heard you were poking around last night." "You hear a lot," Clarence said. "It's my business too," Logan answered. "Problem is, you've made yourself my business now." "I'm not in your business," Clarence said. "And you're not in mine." Logan chuckled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's the thing. Once you walk into certain rooms, you're in it whether you want to be or not." "Then, maybe you shouldn't leave the door open," Clarence replied. Logan's smile faded a fraction. "Careful, old man. I'm trying to be polite." Clarence didn't blink. "I'm not." The silence between them was sharp enough to cut. Finally, Logan pushed off the table. "Enjoy your lunch. Could be your last one here." He and his men turned and left without ordering. Emily came back, eyes wide. "What did you say to him?" "Enough," Clarence said. "Enough to what, make him leave or make him angry?" "Same thing," Clarence answered. The rest of the meal passed without incident, but Clarence knew it wasn't over. He finished his steak, left cash on the table, and stepped outside. The bright afternoon sun didn't make the street feel any warmer. His truck sat where he left it, but now both front tires were flat. He stood there a moment, scanning the street. No sign of Logan. No sign of anyone watching. But he knew better. Clarence walked to the back, popped the tailgate, and pulled out a small air pump. As the pump hummed, he kept his eyes on the reflections in the diner's windows. A figure stood just far enough away to blend into the sidewalk crowd. A man in a dark jacket, watching him without pretending otherwise. Clarence met the man's gaze in the glass. The man didn't move. Didn't flinch. Clarence finished inflating the tires, tossed the pump back in, and drove off. He didn't go home. He headed straight for the Harrow Street warehouse. This time, there were more cars parked outside, 3 SUVs, a pickup. Voices carried from inside, louder than before. Clarence slipped to the side of the building, found that same open window, and listened. Tonight's the move. No delays this time. What about the girl? She stays scared. She stays quiet. Clarence's fists clenched. He pulled back, headed for his truck, and drove toward the diner one last time. Emily was locking up when he arrived. "We need to talk," he said. "Now?" she asked, glancing nervously up the street. "Now," he said firmly. They sat in his truck, windows up. "They're making a move tonight," Clarence told her. "Whatever they've got planned, it's happening in hours." "Then we call the police," Emily said quickly. "Police can't stop what they can't prove," Clarence said. "We need something solid. And how do you plan on getting that?" "By being where they don't want me to be," he replied. Emily shook her head. "You'll get yourself killed." "Maybe," Clarence said. "But if we don't do something, they'll just keep going, and you'll always be looking over your shoulder." She stared at him for a long moment. "My brother would have liked you," she said quietly. Clarence gave the faintest smile. "Let's make sure you don't end up like him." The decision was made. Tonight, Harrow Street wouldn't just be Logan Mercer's ground. It would be a battleground. Clarence started the engine, heading into the growing dusk. Emily sat beside him silent, but her hands were clenched tight in her lap. Neither of them knew exactly what they'd find at the warehouse. But both knew this after tonight. Nothing in Savannah would be the same. Clarence's grip on the wheel tightened as the first lights of Harrow Street came into view. "You ready?" he asked. Emily took a breath. "No, but I'm here." The truck rolled to a stop in the shadows, engine idling low. Somewhere inside that warehouse, Logan Mercer was waiting, and Clarence Darnell was ready to meet him, ready to end this.